Welcome to The Victory Show.
Hey, Victors. Welcome to this episode of The Victory Show. If this is your first time joining us, I'm Travis Cody, best-selling author of 16 books, and I've had the privilege of helping hundreds of business owners, founders, and entrepreneurs write and publish their own best-selling books as well. And in that journey, I discovered a really fascinating pattern. There's a lot of businesses that hit revenue plateaus, usually around $1 million, and they struggle to break through it. So on this show, I sit down with some of the world's most successful CEOs, leaders, and business owners to uncover the strategies they use to overcome those plateaus and scale their businesses to new heights so that you can do the same. So get ready for some deep insights and actionable takeaways that you can implement in your life and business starting now. Now, today's guest, he's not just leading an organization, he's leading a movement for real sustainable community transformation. J.W. Frye is the Chief Executive Officer of Rebuilding Together East Bay Network, and under his leadership, the organization has scaled rapidly, bringing millions of dollars in new funding into programs that tackle affordable housing, workforce development, education, and the social determinants of health. In just the last year, the network secured a $250,000 grant from Alameda County to build affordable ADUs for low-income residents. And they also landed a groundbreaking $1.5 million Equity-Electrification Award, creating real solutions at the intersection of housing, sustainability, and economic mobility. Now, JW is also the force behind initiatives like the Just Transition Pilot Program with the City of Berkeley, providing green energy upgrades to income qualified residents, and the thing I'm most excited to talk about, the Big Skills Program, which is a hands-on construction training project that's addressing both the housing shortage and the skills gap at the same time. So through coalition building, visionary partnerships, and the relentless focus on holistic community development, JW is proving that change isn't just possible, it's happening right now, and you and I can actually be part of it. So JW, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. I'm really looking forward to it. Let's see what
All
you
right, so we're gonna get in here, but we're gonna dive into this good stuff first. But I always love everybody's journey, and your journey was a bit interesting because normally they go, oh, you're in real estate development, you're doing all this crazy stuff. You're probably, like one of those kids that grew up with a trust fund and was in development your whole life. But you actually, coming out of college, got into the entertainment industry.
Yeah, Travis,
In
you're
a
right.
way, in a way. Let's talk
Yeah,
about that a little bit.
yeah, 100%. So the my when I kind of told you I have a background. My father was a management consultant and outside of New York City, and my mother was a social worker who really worked with
Oh, that is a mix.
yeah, rural families. And I like to think that I kind of came together and my path is really reflective of both of them. And when I was younger, they both passed away a few years apart,
Oh,
but
wow.
used hospice care. And so in 2009, I started out on this long 8,000 mile solo self-supported bicycle journey from the Key West, Florida to Prudhoe Bay, Alaska at the Arctic Shelf. Doing
Wow.
so, I went house to house and hospice to hospice, and I talked to people about their whole lives, and just sat with them and tried to show the world that, that 6 months, because that's how long it took, is the beginning of a journey, not the end of one. So I really saw, but what I also learned was I saw so many different communities, so many different needs at this intersection of the social determinants of health angle. So it was just so impactful to me. And so the first thing that it really did was um, gave me a passion for storytelling, which I was able to do in the entertainment industry.
Mm.
But this idea of community development stayed with me. So even while in entertainment, I was still leveraging some of the funds from the, my percentage of the merch sales, and ferreting it away, and then started with buying very distressed properties and then rehabilitating them as
Wow.
community assets.
So I want to take a step back there because you just kind of glossed over the fact that you did an 8,000-mile bike trip. How did you hear about somebody doing that, or you just said, you know what, I'm gonna ride from the southern point of America all the way to the northernmost part? Like, how did that come about?
That came about, well, I think it's, if you're young enough and just kind of foolish, the idea of riding a bicycle, at that point, I didn't even know how long it was from the bottom of the continent to the top, just felt like it just felt right, I guess I would say. And then I thought, well, how do you do this? And what does it mean to raise money and awareness and funds and advocate for a non-for-profit? So I just decided one night that I was going to do it. And I was like, well, I got to learn how to ride a bicycle because it wasn't like I was a bicycling enthusiast. And I have to learn how to run a non for profit. And I have to learn about this community benefit system. And then I just then as now, it really comes from a conceptual narrative based framing.
Mm,
And the idea was that this is a 6 month solo and self supported journey that can show how much one person living this intentional action every day can do to affect a vast network of people, heralding the history of the hospice volunteers over the last 100 years doing that
mm,
work, and especially the hospice nurses. And then conversely, when a vast network of people each just do their own little part, how much impact they can make on one person's life. And I thought, well, what if I do this as a volunteer and I give away 100% of the proceeds as I go and just trust that the network will carry me through to the end? I can give a beautiful and convincing uh, uh, you know, I guess proof of proof of the metaphor of
yeah.
what hospice is, and then
Wow.
it kind of just unrolled from there.
Wow. So you're in the Bay Area now. Is that where you ended up settling, especially as you came out of this and started to get into, so you're developing properties here. Where does the idea to come in and start helping manage entertainers fall into that in that
So,
process?
so actually, it's funny because I get up to Alaska and I look at the Arctic Ocean and I wait for the couple of days and to get picked up and go down and I'm thinking to myself, this is so beautiful. I'm glad I never have to see it again. I don't want to see a bike again. I don't want to see. I just spent the last, better part of 2 months of that 6 months was in the wilderness,
Yeah.
in the
Alaska.
Canadian Rockies and the
Mm,
Yukon, and like on the ice. It was, uh, for somebody who up until that point, like roughing it meant, Starbucks being at a heavy cream, and having just spent the last 2 months in the woods, I thought I'm never coming back to Alaska again. But the world had other plans, and uh, a, a very close, basically sister of mine who was raised with me, but then moved to Alaska. My godson was born a year later. I go back up
So as
there.
you were standing there on that shelf going, I'm never gonna come here again, God was like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
this is gonna be so much fun.
yeah. So the choreography of the universe had me step back there a little bit later, and I ended up meeting and I was, after having told the story and doing speaking engagements following the ride, across the country, mostly in the U.S., talking about end of life care and all of that and the need for it and the benefits of it, I I just love the storytelling aspect of that. So the video production and the speech writing and the commercials and the that sort of thing, the messaging. And then I just continued to work on that messaging. And because I was, just a young guy starting out, it doesn't, pay very well to be a copywriter and a public speaker. And so I would take all different sorts of jobs, and that included helping on the lyrics side of hip hop and soul and rock music, anybody that would have me. And so that led to the entertainment development. And then I met,
Right.
there happened to be up in Alaska when I was there, close friend of mine was doing reality television. And then there were also credits going back for feature filmmaking in Alaska at the time. And
Oh yeah, the tax.
yeah, the tax. So So they needed people to score, to PA, to field produce all this different content. And I met I met a guy who was a songwriter and just a local bar band hero, but he was super talented. And so I worked with him to co-write some scores for feature films that were being going on up there, and then
Wow.
a couple of those took off, and then his local bar band became a mid-major touring band, in the US and Japan and other places. And I just kind of went on for the ride. So yeah, so I was actually back and forth between California and Alaska, depending on which production company I was working with. And then the tours that started, a couple few years after that. So that's how I was up there. And then my now wife was, after she got her MBA in Boston, was flying out to the West Coast to start working at a tech company. And she made a 14-day solo backpacking trip out of it in Alaska. Happened to cross paths with her, fell madly in love, and yeah. And then we were long distance for
Sure.
years until the pandemic. And then I was on this side of the wall when the curtain came down.
All right. Wow. There's so much to unpack there, but you mentioned something earlier where when you were managing bands and musicians but then you in that process you started to pick up community centers and rehab them.
Yeah.
Where did that idea come from?
It came from need, basically. There was the two things that I always look at, and we'll get into it when we start to think about like methodology for growing and scaling resilient companies. For me, it's always been, and I didn't have it as a set modality at the time, but it's grown into a very specific and conscientious look at you and a network of coalition partners, and mapping assets between you and potential partners, as well
Mhm.
as customers, especially in the community development space, where your main customers are public agencies, or program funding. And then just mapping the assets, and then finding a way where you map somebody else's assets onto what you need, and vice versa, or triangulate between a couple of different partners, and then seeing how you can take the assets that you have, either in people or resources, and then grow the capacity of them working in concert, and so
Mm.
and to meet needs. And so yeah, there's a in rural Alaska, just like there is in rural Appalachia and some other key areas that are still very much third world villages in the United States. Like,
Yeah.
realize that the third world is in North America, but it is in Alaska Native communities, as well as Appalachia and some other
Yeah.
reserve lands in the
Well, you get on some of the Native American reservations, yeah, for still got dirt floors.
Yeah. And imagine, it's probably not too hard to imagine those same dirt floors and a lack of insulation in a place that gets 40 below zero and is pitch black for half the year. And you won't be just imagining things, you'll be visualizing the way that people are living in flying communities, even to today, in
Mm.
Alaska Native communities. And then you just see just really a lack of follow through and sophistication with bringing together people who, like, you might have somebody that could do the building. You might have somebody that could put down the amount of money you need. You might have somebody that, can work with a private foundation or a public grant and write it. But they're not working in concert, and they're
Mhm.
not, bought into a singular vision. And so that's what I was doing, in addition to the television, and then later almost exclusively music production and business management. I saw where music gatherings and events could bring together, cities, tourism, leverage things, partners like Alaska Airlines and
Mhm.
the NBC affiliates out there. And by bringing all those groups together, we were able to do things like create a singing competition that also taught and onboarded and platformed diverse singers,
Wow.
performers. And you wouldn't think about it, but the both in there were 3 seasons of that. It was like The Voice, but for Alaska. In those 3 seasons, we had the Tiny Desk, the 2019 Tiny Desk winner for NPR was a semifinalist season.
What?
Yeah. And then somebody that didn't even make the top three, Emma Watson, became Miss USA. And so it's like there's so much talent, and those particular, the television show drove tens of thousands of people to events to develop a downtown core. And so
Wow.
seeing how you can get these knock-on benefits that is really centered around the assets that you have and developing them, platforming them, giving them the opportunity to really scale up your impact.
Wow. All right. So this is interesting because your experience with real estate development, completely unrelated to this, you're doing these things on the side anyway. And then you get into the management, and then because your mom's a social worker, you have a lens to community needs, especially in rural stuff, and
Mhm.
these things open up to you. Like it's just I always love the fact of like how your unique background and experience gives you this lens to see things completely uniquely, blending two things together that most people probably wouldn't have ever thought, right? Property development with community giving back, right? And property giving and community enrichment, right? So so obviously then this is 2019. Then we have the big stoppage. I guess that's a good way for the thing to call it for now. How did that, like, what happened from during that period of time?
Yeah,
Besides
so
it forcing you to have to then go spend more time with your girlfriend.
yeah, actually, at this time, I've been married now. By 2020, I've been married 3 or 4 years.
Oh, so you were doing long distance marriage too.
Yes, I was
Wow.
also doing long distance
All
marriage.
right.
So it was 10 days together and 20 days off is how we kind of is how we formed.
That's very Hollywood of you.
Yeah, it was. It was. I'm glad that I made it through. We didn't have to consciously uncouple. Um, but yeah, so I was flying back and forth, and then I was on this side. I was in the Bay Area at the time when the pandemic stuff was announced in March of 2020. And then, like everybody else, I was stuck in a house, and all the income that was mostly live music events um, space rentals and concerts and events at the community centers that I'd taken my meager allowances and put into. Uh, that was gone in a snap of a finger. And
Yeah.
I was in California, and all of the stimulus money went through your state unemployment. So I couldn't
Oh,
even get that money. So I was
oh
like, oh
no.
no, this is terrible. And I'm living with my wife, and I just felt I felt like such a loser because I wasn't making any money, and I was basically a kept man for those first couple of months. And I took it on my ego a little bit, but then I stopped whining and moping, and I was like, well, I get to go and work on some of my projects. I think some people, it shuts down and they're like, oh, well, now I can do my passion, or like learn to play the guitar or whatever. In mine, it was instead of playing the guitar, because that's what I was doing, writing and producing music, I was like, what about the community development thoughts and ideas and papers and policies that I wanted to do? Because my education is in public policy and public service.
Mm.
And so I did. So I started working on a policy paper, recommendation paper, and I was doing some analysis, basically, of retail lease rates in neighborhoods that were either within or adjacent to formerly redlined areas, showing And I was just really looking at the investment in and the building of wealth through housing and how that affected the small and medium business community adjacent to those areas. And I came across Rebuilding Together. They were thinking of maybe shutting down, but they also had a lot of insight because it's an agency that does repair and renovation for.
How long had they been running when you came
They
in?
had been running for 25 years.
So they'd been around for a while.
Been around for a while. For the majority of that time, they were an all volunteer network
Wow.
of contractors and union people and just handy, like ex-lawyers who still love to tinker, that would go around and every year, fix 10, 20 homes up for people for no money. And they would just come out and crack open, some brewskis afterwards and all have pizza and beer and fix up some homes and do it again next year in April. So that's what they used to be. The agency was, and it had grown up a little bit to be more of a build all the year round. And they had one government contract, but that was in peril and they didn't know, they were thinking they might have to close down, both due to the pandemic and also just it was starting to peter out. They weren't able to make that transition over into a paid professional staff.
Mm.
And but then they said, "Hey, would you mind if you want to? You can not only have this information that you want for your research paper, you can do your research with us, and uh, and you can run this agency." And I said, "Yeah, sure."
I love it. Sure. All right. So what was that first year like then? So you're in this an agency now that they're like, we've got 1 month of cash to get us through. Year over year, we're underwater.
Yeah,
Good luck. So
yeah.
how do you go from that to let's walk through that first year. What were when you came into that, like what was the vision that you set, knowing that that's where you were at?
Well, the vision was pretty straightforward. I kind of spoke to you a little bit about what at this time is more of an operational methodology that I had seen work
Mhm.
and had experienced it working, not just for me, but for other companies and investment groups. So a lot of the work that I had done as my avocation, the community development side, and real estate development was really about looking at the needs of industry and setting that against the community needs, and then finding where there's unrealized value creation that is not being either expressed or getting that ROI for those partners. And so I pitched the board of directors, this board of directors, as well as the national Rebuilding Together National in DC, on an idea of doing an asset scan, which for the first, I put in about 70 hours a week, night and day over the week.
Part-time job.
Yeah, I did about 70 hours a week for the first 20 months or so. So there's that. So just know that there's a huge amount of just willing it too. It can't be understated. But at the expense of oversimplifying, basically we just looked and I just looked. What are all the things that this agency has accomplished? Broke those down to first principles, specifically what are the building blocks, what are the exact activities that you did, what are the assets that you have, what is the skill level of the network that you have. And then I just put that basically into a very simple 4-column matrix, and then went around to every elected official's campaign website, every comp plan. And this was before we had AI,
This is a
so I had to
manual.
do it manual. So I basically became Chat GPT at the time, where I would go for runs or exercise at 3x speed. I converted everything into PDFs and it listened to it at like 2x speed. And I'd listen to it a time or two and then read it and then put everybody like overlaid every elected official, all new policies that were coming out of the state, HUD guidances, and all of that. And then I just mapped it. I mapped it where we had assets that weren't being, expressed in the community, of these basically un, the best way I can describe it is when you go in and you fix a home, there's a bunch of services that are being provided
Mhm.
and a bunch of things that are being done but aren't being capitalized on. And
Sure.
so, for instance, it all started with working with Samuel Merritt University because their occupational therapy and registered nurse programs need clinical hours.
Mm.
So, for home health training hours in the field, they need to be able to go into people's homes. Well, you can't go into people's homes, A, when it's in COVID times, unless you're a first responder, which students aren't first responders because they're in education. So what we were able to do is we were able to go in and make home assessments of folks because these were safety fixes that were being made. So it was a first responder. So I
Mm.
was able to bootstrap their program because now they have, a couple hundred nurses and occupational therapists that need their clinical hours. And so by looking at just the assessments that you make before you do the fixes, I realized there was a platform to then plug in. And then that was our first healthcare dollars, and that was like 60 or $70,000. So it got us out of the hole within months of being there. And so I just mapped that across, elected officials and all of that. And I took
Wow.
that on there, do casework for all your elected officials and make sure that they, you can show value and show their constituency the value. And then who's the first person they call when they have a large thing to do, or if later on you're trying to launch a large, 3 county workforce development education thing, it's good to have, one of the first schools be the one that's has the governor's daughter starting her freshman year there, stuff like that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Wow. I mean, what a first off though, there's so few people I think that would go about that in the strategic way that you did. Like even just thinking of going, let me start going through all the elected officials' websites and seeing what their causes are and then mapping all that stuff together. You were you were like a business serial killer where you had all the little strings into
Yeah,
the all coming into the community development and
yeah,
Gavin Newsom's heads and they're all going in here that there's a but,
100%. That's like
that
that. That's literally exactly
that
what.
that is a bad analogy, but like that's I just see the board on your wall. And again, like from a business perspective, I don't know of too many people that would do that. So that was I mean, that's pretty innovative right there. So let's talk a little bit about the two big things you guys are working on, which is the Just Transition program and the Big Skills program.
Yeah, so I'll start with the Just Transition pilot program because going into 2020, that was also, if some of us may remember, there was a bit of an election, a US election that happened that year.
Allegedly, there was. Mhm.
Yeah, allegedly. And so the election and going into it, I my partner, Preeti, I had mentioned went into tech. Well, she went into clean energy
Mm.
technology. And there was a 32-page policy report paper called Clean Energy for Biden, which then became a standalone agency called Clean Energy for America.
Mm.
In those policy papers, I knew would be the bedrock of the policy that was later to turn into the Inflation Reduction Act spending, as well
Wow.
as some of the other Build Back Better infrastructure.
It was all part of that original 32 document, the
Yeah,
32-page document. Wow.
yeah, it's 32. Each one of those is like 100 pages long, but they're
Sure.
detailed policy explainers.
Yep.
So I did not go and read all of those and commit them all to memory. What I did do was I went in and started looking at the executive summaries of each of those and
Mhm.
see where they mapped onto residential decarb, just to pick a focus right off the bat, and then started going out and using traditional home repair uh, scopes of work, basically, and saw where there was overlap. And so already starting to do decarbonization, energy efficiency, weatherization jobs out of existing funding, so that I knew that when this larger tranche of funding, they were gonna scramble to find home repair companies that
Yeah.
could work in the residential space to do retrofit versus new build, and they were going to need the technicians themselves to do the work. So starting in about 2021, I just made a very concerted effort to, make sure that all of our projects and programs continue to interface with the state sustainability departments of the various jurisdictions, so that we could be both a technical supporter of as well as an implementer for when those funds came available. And then it happened, So City of
Wow.
Berkeley was one of them, but then also the Jobs First, which is a big workforce development tranche of money from the Governor Newsom's administration. It's it's all from the same people writing the clean energy for Biden, are the same people writing the stuff for
Mhm.
Jobs First, or the same people writing for
Yep.
the PUC workforce, equitable pathways.
Yep.
So then I just that's what we did. So right now we're in the we're doing about $1 million to $2 million a year in equity electrification and
Wow.
training hundreds of people to go directly into those jobs, and that's either completely just starting from your last 2 years of high school into a little bit at a junior college, and then you're in industry, and
Wow.
also retraining contractors that are out there right now, especially small and minority contractors, into how to interface with the government. So we basically built this roadmap of exactly how you go out there. Here's the paperwork. It's not scary. And then did all of our requests for proposals for subcontractors where you onboard, and by doing the work you actually learn how to kind of fish for yourself in the equity electrification space.
Well, I mean, what a fantastic thing, though. I just look at I know for so long, excuse me, you know, our generation who came up was like college, 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 right? It's just kind of beating your head. But we're to this point now where, I mean, if you're 18 and you don't like school, like you can go to a year and a half of training and come right into a fantastic career that's going to have some very sustainable longevity. I mean, what a way to get started. You know.
And realistically, it's the college experience for me, and I love to learn, huge nerd. I still read paper books, like the background, the kids who are watching at home might even not know what they are. But, and I love it, and I love education. But if I looked at it from a strictly cost benefit analysis perspective, there's not there's not any 4-year degree that's going to put you in a better position financially to provide for yourself, to be able to have real economic security throughout your life from a 4-year education. There's very little. Most of
Well, especially the amount of money you spend to get to that point.
That's what I mean. That's precisely what I mean,
We,
ROI wise. Like you can put in, 60, 80, 100, $200,000 depending on the institution, and you're not going to be in much more of a competitive advantage of anybody else that's already in that industry. And with
yeah.
the rise of, the this next generation of technological advance, I just don't know how many CS degrees are going to get you into a program as being a junior designer or a
Yeah.
professional.
Yeah.
A lot
Well,
of
I mean, just like again, right? Like you look at it going, and I'm this is gonna be a bad analogy because like right now America's having a doctor shortage, so we need doctors. But when you look at the path for a doctor, right? 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, 4 to 8 years of residency, right? So you're looking minimum 12 years from when you graduate high school. And somebody else goes, you know what, I'm going to go into HVAC, a year and a half of training. And now the doctor's getting started 12 years from now with $250,000 of debt. And you now have had 12 years of a career of making 80, 100, 120,000 a year. Right? It's just such a, like, you look at that going, boy, wow, that's, It's just such a yeah, and we're in a whole new arena because of this stuff. So it's just yeah, it's fascinating to see. And so the fact that there's your group and recognizing that this need and then putting all of these resources together to define exactly what we were saying, right? It's not just the skills, but it's also you need the practice and you need the, some instances you need the clinical hours, right? Where do we get those? And the fact that you're providing those. So how did the big skills program, did that come out of the Just Transition pilot program, or was these things kind of launching at the same time?
Yeah, all these things are kind of launching at the same time. It's really great to be talking to you now. It's also great to be talking to you now as somebody who's, doing multiple millions of dollars a year in revenue, because that was not the case back then.
Far cry from the
Yeah.
negative hole.
And I had it, well, and it's also too to, to anybody out there listening, you're going, if you're, if you want a return and you want to create something and you're convicted in the fact that it's not there, that the white space is there. If there is truly a white space and no one's done it already, means no one's going to do it, means that even just you seeing it is going to be very unintuitive and it will seem either scammy or ridiculous or confusing to anybody that you're trying to talk to about it. And in fairness, you will be confusing. And,
Because you're
because
still trying to figure it out. You haven't figured out
I'm
where
gonna figure
the
it out.
kinks are yet.
Yeah, and you have to kind of like 5 years ago, 4 years ago, I'm selling well, there's if Biden gets elected, there's gonna be, infrastructure spending and and then if you look if you play that forward, electrification is actually about HVAC. It's not even about electricians. So you have to really look at HVAC short. Like, and you're saying all this stuff at the same time as you're saying like there's a a crisis with housing and you're going to come off kind of wild. But now looking back on it, you really are pushing all these things forward at the same time. And it's not that going back into our initial part of the conversation, it's about a coalition because you're never going to be able to convince Joe Public, one elected official, that all of this stuff is going to happen and then it's going to benefit them in a way that they could never have imagined because it's so there's so many knock on and carry on benefits from these other activities. So what I would say is yes, it was all developed in concert, but you're developing it on parallel tracks
Mm.
where each one of the partners, each one of the beneficiaries of whatever product or service that is coming out, you don't ask them to envision or sign on to or partner with the giant vision. You talk to the schools about what they need with teacher shortage. And you say, this program will provide you a teacher. You don't tell them that you're going to convert the local public school into a factory and build modular houses to then put in the backyards of people's homes, because that's a bridge too far. They never heard about any of that. So you just talk to the schools about teacher shortage and you say, we have a program that will provide an additional $25,000 just for an instructor and to train them and to keep them in, working for your school. And I will also hire an additional 4 teachers assistants for my people to come in. And then they're like, great, where do we sign? And they still complain. But you do that down like 5 down line. You
Yeah.
know, you talk to the homeowner about, hey, we'll do these repairs, and then we'll do electrification because they don't even want, nobody wants to hear you're taking their gas stove, but everybody wants to hear that you're repainting the house and swapping out all the windows for free. So you do the windows, you say how much this is saving. We could save more if we do high energy, high efficiency appliances. And if you go all electric, which does include the stove, which I know you don't like, we can do solar and battery backup and you'll pay nothing for energy. And then you start with that. So that's how I would say is that yes, the methodology is to don't ask anybody to do too much differently than they're already doing now.
Mhm.
And then make sure that if you do that well, you can count on 80 or 90% efficiency of them to continue to produce what they're already producing. And so you can count on that as an output and then use that as an input to the next thing, that's working in parallel.
I love it. Wow. So what's the next 5 years look like for your organization? Where are you guys headed?
Yeah, so right now we have 8 sites, including 2 large logistical hubs. And we're working with both the California Trades Councils, the different regional councils, as well as the overseeing body, and that's on the union side, as well as our California Building Industry Association
Mm,
on the non-union side, which is that in and of itself is the biggest coup of ever because it's the only program or project that's shared by the non-union and
wow.
union contractors doing building in the state of California. And so we've convened them over these different sites. The goal is that we'll have at least 4 sites in each one of the 9 Bay Area counties within the next 3 years, and then to go from Northern California and then mirror it down in Southern California, starting in San Diego County, and then going Los Angeles, and then growing towards that we'll be able to have upwards of about 225 sites. And when I say sites, I mean, and if it's not been made clear, the program that we do not only trains HVACs, electricians, um, and carpenters, all the skilled building and finishing trades. It also provides education to emerging developers, so city planners, civil
Mm,
engineers, architects, as well as developers, both with the curriculum. It is also producing at the junior college and high school level 2 units per year of affordable factory-built modular ADUs, which we
wow.
are then placing into the backyards of low-income adults and faith-based lands. So we have like a 16-unit small home development for a faith-based institution right now in Livermore that's being built at the College of Marin campus in Nevada.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, so the idea would be that we have in the next 5 years up to a capacity of providing hundreds of units of affordable housing for only completely all in sited and everything, only less than $130,000 for a unit of affordable housing that the
Wow.
rent goes to lifting low income community centers and individuals out of poverty, and tens of thousands of students and hundreds, if not thousands, of early career construction professionals.
So someone's listening to this conversation, they're reading this chapter in the book. How do they, and they want to, either they want to consult with you or they want to get involved in what you're doing. How do they find you? How do they get involved?
Yeah, the easiest way is just to go to www.rtebn.org or put Rebuilding Together East Bay Network in, and then just reach right out to any of our staff or agencies. And we have a really great internal communications between us and other networked and affiliated organizations throughout the region. So it's not, we're all very easy to get a hold of. And if you want in the show notes, I can put my deputy director's email in, and
You
she
bet.
takes a lot of the calls and make sure whether it's my help that's needed, or it's oftentimes depending on who you are and how you want to engage. I'm probably the least now, you know,
The way it
benefit.
should be, though, if you're running a good team.
Yeah, no, the team is, and that's another thing too, as far as just this where we're at right now, yeah, it was my vision, and there was not a chance in hell that it's going to be done without the team that we have on staff. And then that's its own whole story of growing, engaging, and pouring into these other human beings, and watching that light come on, and then everybody starting to align towards this common goal. That's the For me. I don't get to go and build the houses with the kids. I wish I could. That would be amazing. But I don't get to do much of anything really hands on, and so it only goes as far as this staff can take it.
I love it. JW, this has been fantastic. I love the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to chat with us.
Yeah, it was amazing. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
having me, Travis.
Yeah, you're welcome. Cheers.